All right. Okay. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone from around the world that's joining us today. So it's pleasure that that we have you, uh, each of you from the around the world for our today's session. So, uh, as you see here in our slide. Our second session of the June actually postponed to the August 3rd. So as Scott has had some issue and some emergency situation, and he couldn't actually be able to run the session. So his session postponed to the August 3rd. So today we have a special guest, Samir Makwana. So we are going to host the Samir session today. Actually, let me introduce myself. I'm Arash Agajani. I'm a Microsoft MVP and technical architect from the Vancouver, Canada. Uh, Nadija and I are leading the Power Platform Zero to Hero community. And first of all, I'm going to a little introduce our Microsoft Learn community. And let me share my screen here. Okay. So, okay, so what's it? The Microsoft Learn community. The Microsoft Learn community is a collection of experiences offering learners with a variety of ways to connect and engage with other learners and technical experts to increase expertise on the topics that matter most to learners and achieve career goals. So, uh, achieve your learning goals by connecting with other learners and our worldwide network of Microsoft Learn experts in our all-new learning rooms designed for direct engagement into topic-specific question via synchronous discussion and virtual session to help you achieve your skill building goals in a global, diverse, and inclusive environment. So, Power Platform Zero to Hero is one of the Microsoft learning room, which has more than 1,500 members, and we are sharing the latest information about Power Platform in our learning room, and also conduct this series of session for Power Platform enthusiasts. So if you are not member of our tech community, you can join us through the this link. Let me share the link here. So it's aka.ms/power platform 0 to hero. So also there is a code of conduct here for all of our sessions. So we empower people worldwide by sharing knowledge and events like the Power Platform Zero to Hero community. We respect everyone's diversity and dignity and expect the same from you. So please follow these standards and help us to create a safe and welcoming space. So, okay, before we begin, a few important things and notes here. If you have any question during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat box. We will have a dedicated question and answer session toward at the end. This session is being recorded for those who couldn't join us live and will be available shortly in the Microsoft Power Platform Zero to Hero YouTube channel. Okay, that's all at my end. So awesome. I'm without any delay, I will hand it over to you, Samir, to start your presentation. Let me add Samir to our stage here. Okay. Hello and welcome. Okay. Oh, you are muted, Samir?
All right,
Okay.
here we go. Thank you so much, Harsh, for helping me on this and let me present to the community.
You're welcome.
Thanks everyone joining this session. today we're gonna talk about automate your ID service requests with Power Automate M365 and Azure. Let me give you a brief introduction about myself. But before we do that, I'm just showing the QR code on the screen. That's a QR code for all the content and all the demo. I'm going to show it to you. So that's one of my OneDrive. You can go ahead and have it with you later on if you want to do your own labs. Um, I'm talking about myself. I'm Samir Makwana. I live in Canada, north of Toronto. There's a small town called Collingwood. I'm a founder of Cloud35. It's a IT consulting company. I work with Microsoft for a few years, and I've been in IT from 17 plus years. My areas of expertise are automation, M365, cybersecurity, and custom software solutions. And I work with different variety of clients, including banking, financial, and insurance sector, city, provincial, and federal governments, and media, entertainment, oil, gas, and utilities. Uh, and this is the QR code for my LinkedIn if you guys want to connect with me on LinkedIn and chat more about this. Um, so today's agenda, we're going to talk about automation best practices, automation product lifecycle. We're going to jump on the workflow, how we are going to do the lab, or how I'm going to demo the service request automation to you guys. And basically after that, it will be all demo in the lab I have. So rather than putting more time on PPT. I'm more on a hands-on guy, so I'm just gonna jump on the things on the lab soon. But just to give you an idea why automation is dear and nearest to my heart, and why it is important to understand the best practices to look at how we can improve or how we can go for the next steps. So, for example, uh, when I go and start looking at any automation opportunity, if clients come and ask me why you want to, like, if there is any way we can automate this, I generally ask many questions to myself and the client. What is the value I'm giving out of that? Why I'm doing this automation? So, for example, if I'm running a report once a year, there is no way I'm going to put time and effort automating that report, right? But if I'm doing that report every week and it's being presenting in a Power BI or some other way and to the leadership, which giving lots of value, then for sure. So why is very important. Another thing I consider why I while I build automation is user friendly. So end user experience, right? Nowadays UX, UI, it's so important. So end user experience so important while you're building it. So make sure if your automation having anything to do with the end user, be it guys who enter their data into their service tickets and so on, to the letting them know at every stage of the automation, informing them what happening with their service requests, right? So end user is important as well. And the same way, easy to maintain, because when I look at automation, I look at it as a product. So I look at end to end. It should be user friendly. At the same time, it should be easy to maintain for the operation and support team as well. And not least, but secure enough is important, because anytime you go and ask to do something custom or automate something, security team always come and ask you, okay, how are you going to secure this? How are you going to do that and this, right? So we need to make sure that it's secure enough. Um, and always, I think, as I mentioned earlier, automation as a product. So I look at it as a product which going to evolve, which going to integrate with many things. So it's important for us, while we design or make that automation build, we make sure that it's easy to integrate with many products going forward if need to be. So think of like a roadmap of the product and see how we can build the automation accordingly. And the last two are very critical: the audit. So anything you do with automation, we need to make sure we have proper audit logs available. So in case of any legal or compliance issues, we can always have something to go back and check and report it back to the respective team. And the last and most important thing is usage report. So for example, to me, if I build any automation, for me to prove that automation has really given a value or not, I go and check the statistics. For example, how many service requests my automation has, uh, you know, processed throughout the year or 6 months or so that at the end of the year I can show that how many man hours or manual effort I have saved through that automation, which brings value as well as motivation to the team to do something extra on that. Now, automation as a product lifecycle, any software things like that. You identify and assess the requirement, then you build a design and you test it in a test environment and you move it to the production. Then you monitor and audit that just to make sure that it's going well as it used to be and there is no issues. And if there is something, you support and maintain, and you capture those feedback from end user, from operation teams, from the business, or anything which you have found by yourself, right? So you capture all those things, you review them, and eventually you go back to that identifying and assess thing. It's basically a circle where you find, okay, now I need to do some improvements, and I follow the same cycle again and again, right? Um, so in today's demo, what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to show you guys and everyone that one of the client I work with in the past, they have a requirement of a Teams recording request should not be allowed for everyone. It should be limited to only user who get approved, because we know once the recording get recorded, like it stays either on user's laptop or OneDrive, or they either put it in a SharePoint. And if there is no proper data governance, it will be unnecessary data which is getting stored and eventually needs to move. So their goal was to make sure the users, they need recording permission in Teams. They submit the request, then the request goes to approver, they approve it, and on specific date and time, the recording request get enabled on the start, one day before the start date of the meeting, and then when the meeting request recording requirement is over, the next day of the end date of the recording request, that recording permissions or policies will be removed from those users, and they will no longer able to record any more meetings. So so this workflow, I'm not going to deep dive into this, but this workflow basically shows what components we're going to use and how it's going to touch each of those components. So we're going to use SharePoint as consider as a ServiceNow request, where user going to go there and type their request and provide the details. We're going to pull that information through Power Automate. Basically, that SharePoint list, as soon as that item got going to create, that's going to trigger the Power Automate workflow, and that Power Automate workflow will do certain analysis. It will also trigger the approval workflow, and once approval will be done, it's basically gonna call Azure Function, where we have loaded Teams PowerShell module and a small code of PowerShell, where we're gonna assign Teams meeting policy where the recording permissions are enabled. So that policy, as soon as assigned to that user will get rights to record any meeting they have to on that day, right? Uh, so same way, this is the workflow which gonna touch the same components like SharePoint list, Power Automate, Azure Function, and Teams PowerShell and the Teams. And this is the similar workflow as recording disablement. Only thing is gonna, sorry, enablement, but this is gonna be disablement. I'm sorry, I see the typo at the screen. I'll fix it later on my PPT. But this is the disablement uh, workflow, and it's like do exactly the same. It just look for the end date and it's act on it. So so this is a prerequisite for the lab. So and this is the QR code for that OneDrive where I have uploaded all the documents, including how-to guide or this PPT content, and also the script, the PowerShell script, and also Azure Function and the Power Automate flow. So if you need to use that content and build your own lab, you can do that. Okay. So okay, it's 12:17. Okay, so let me jump on. Let me share my screen and jump on the actual demo, so I can show you how I have configured the whole automation in my lab, and we can deep dive into it. Uh, okay, so let me share my screen and see. All right, let me know when you see it. Okay, so I have a bunch of windows open here because I'm not gonna keep opening and then we're gonna wait for that to do it. So basically, I have one SharePoint list here where I'm gonna feed the entry into. What information we are putting is we are saying, okay, the title of the request, the requester, business justification. So basically, why you are requesting for recording rights, what start date you want to put there for the recording rights, what is the end date you want to put it for the end of the recording rights, so that automation can remove the recording permissions, and who will be the approver, and what is the status of your approval, what is the status of your recording rights, what is the status of your overall request. So these are the information we're going to use and leverage into Power Automate to define and decide what to do next on this. But before I go there, let me go ahead and show you the workflow I have in Power Automate. So we have three workflow. One is Power Automate workflow for when item is created, trigger that workflow for the approval. And then I have two separate workflow, which is based on the schedule rather than the item created. And one is for enablement and one is for disablement. I'm going to show that too. Right. So while that is loading, I'm going to take you to Teams admin portal just to show you what I have configured here. So I have one Teams recording, so Teams meeting policy, which name as Teams recording enable. And if I go under there, I have meeting recording enable for that policy. And yep. And if I see right now, there is no user assigned to that policy. So we're good on that. All right. And also I have opened a couple of tabs here where we're going to jump on Azure Function, and I'm going to show you how it looks there as well. So going back to Power Automate flow. So we have three different flows. The first one is when item got created. The second one is Teams recording enablement, and the third one is disablement. I'm going to expand each of this so you guys see that. Okay, so in this section, what we are saying is when item got created in this site, which is my SharePoint site, and this is the specific list where I'm creating the item. When item got created in this, do following. So basically, it's going for approval, and I'm saying, okay, approve or reject, and then I'm saying the title for that request. So when it goes to the approver will see what this request is for. So I'm saying it's for Teams recording request, and I have pulled a couple of information from that SharePoint list, which we're gonna feed in the data. So first is assign to. So this approval tab, whom it should go. So if I go back to the SharePoint list, you see there is an approver column. So So I'm taking it as a field 4 here, and I'm going to use that as a field here, so I don't need to modify it every time. So field 4 email address, that's where it should go to. And the details is nothing but the field 1, and that is nothing but business justification. So whenever the request goes to approver, they see, okay, this is the team recording request, this is the justification, and this is the link of that item in that list. So if they need to go back and see the details about it, they can click on the link and they can look into it, right? Now, once that is done, whatever the outcome of that approval, so basically, while we're gonna wait for that approval, start and wait for approval, whatever the outcome of that approval, approval reject, based on the outcome, we're gonna do certain action on that. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna say, go back and update the same SharePoint list with the approved status. So when we're gonna submit the request, the status of that approval was not yet started. Recording will be disabled and request status will be open. But as soon as the approval was done, approval will be done, it will be set to approved. Recording will be still disabled because at this stage, it's only approved. The request is only approved, but it's not actually processed by the team's policy. So once that is done, it's going to also notify the user saying that, okay, we received your request and it has been approved. It's going to enable recording and so date. So wait for the next notification, right? And we're going to do that. Now, let's go ahead and trigger that flow so we know how it looks. So if I say here, Teams recording request, I'm going to say defend. That's one of my test user. Wow. Ooh. Let me refresh the page. It might be just open from a while. Yeah. Defend for 365. Power platform 0 to hero demo. I'm going to say date. I'm going to say, because it's going to trigger the flow a day before, I'm going to say enable the recording today and eventually disable the recording today. So it will be disabled. Sorry, let me do it this way because I want my logic to be run one day before. So I'm thinking I'm working in the past and I'm going to put the date as 21st and date as 21st for this. So I'm going to use it for one day and I'm going to see how it goes. So for approver, I'm going to put myself as approver. And it's not yet started, disabled, and open, right? That's the thing it says. I'm going to say exit the recording. Okay, so we have not yet started. This is the request. Now, if I go here and see if it has run any flow, it hasn't triggered anything yet. So while we are waiting for that, let me go ahead and show you the flow for how it's going to enable the recording. Okay. So enable recording flow. As you can see, I run every 3 hours. what exactly do is it's go and pull the list of items from the SharePoint list, the same SharePoint list, but there is a query I have put here. So if you look at the query, it's basically say pull only the item which is approved, pull only the item where recording status is disabled, and pull only the item where request status is still open. So by having this filter, I'm not going to touch any request which is not yet approved or rejected. I'm not going to pull any request to process in this loop, which is already enabled, right? And I'm not going to touch any request which is closed. So that's the filter we have used here. And once we have that, what we're doing here is we are processing each of the item based on the start date, right? So think about the request is approved, but the start date is next week. So we're not going to enable the recording for that user until the start date comes. So that request will still stay there until the start date. It will not be processed. So the start date here, what we are saying, and this is very important piece of the logic, where you can say, I'm just going to see if I can expand this. It's not. I'm going to hover over that. So it says convert the time from UTC, add 1 day to that, and provide the time zone in Eastern time zone, which is my time zone. And this is the date format. So basically, the time I'm pulling from the UTC, I'm adding 1 day to that, and I'm converting to that Eastern time zone and taking the output as a specific date frame. And once that is done, it's going to compare if the start date is less than tomorrow, then enable the recording. That's what exactly it's doing. And to do that, what we are doing here is we are calling the Azure function with the HTTP post method. This is the URL. I'm going to show you how we got this. This is not the most secure way I've done it because it's a demo. There are so many things we can do to improve this flow. The one of the thing is this, the authentication. We should have OAuth or the client certificate-based authentication. So what this gonna do, it's gonna take all the data from that list and the start date's gonna be processed here. And then when it's time to HTTP request, it's gonna take the request or email only into the body of the request, and it's gonna post to this URL. And after that, whatever the response of that HTTP function, it's gonna capture that response in the body, and it's gonna parse it into JSON, because we're gonna require details on what exactly happened to that HTTP Azure function call, right? Was it successful? Was there any exception? Was the policy assignment was done correctly or not? And so on, right? So we're gonna capture those attributes here. And based on the outcome of those attributes, if there is any failure, we're gonna post a message to the admin to look into saying that, okay, there was a failure into the Azure function flow, right? But if there's all our success, so for example, connect to Teams PowerShell was successful, uh, getting the user was successful, and then assigning the policy was successful, and disconnecting the PowerShell session was successful. If all the attribute value was successful, then go ahead and update the same SharePoint list saying that, okay, now request was approved, but now recording status is enabled, and but request is still open because we haven't disabled your recording rights. It's going to be disabled on the end date. But now as your recording is enabled, I want to notify user right away. And this time we're going to use a Teams post message. So we're going to post a message to that user saying, or requester saying that, okay, your request is approved and now today is the day it's enabled, and it will be disabled the next day after the end date you have submitted in your request. So this is like the whole flow. Now I'm going to go back to that create, when item the approval workflow, and we'll see what exactly happened. Okay. Strange. It says it's running. Let's have a look. Okay. So it's waiting for approval. So let me go to my Teams and see if I have any pop-up for approval. Nope, nothing. So I have a 2 users. It might be because of that user where it goes for approval. So 1 second, let me go back and cancel this. Okay, I'm gonna go to the list. I'm gonna edit this. Let's see, approver, Samir, Cloudify. I think, let me put the same user and see how it looks. Ta-da. All right, flow checker. It's a live troubleshooting. Nothing. All right. Edit. Test. Manually. All right. It's better. Let me create a new item instead. All right. Teams recording request. Defend demo for Power Platform 0 to hero. Date is yesterday. I'm gonna put defend so there is no email confusion. I'm gonna exit the grid. I'm gonna go and check. All right. And I have my defend user having a Teams account, so I'm just opening it and refreshing it. And there's a team recording request. I think I know what happened because it's wait on approval or rejection. And I think I put a wrong email address maybe at the time while creating the previous request. But as you can see, the recording request has came in. This is the information we shared as a business justification. This is the link where we can go and click and find what is the request is about, right? So I can, as a approver, I can go and review it. And then after I come back here, I say, okay, all good to go. And I say approve. So as soon as I approve here, it's gonna complete this approval flow. And as you can see, it has updated the item and it should have sent an email as well to that user. So First of all, we'll go ahead and check if item get updated or not. So the bottom one should be updated. So I'm just going to refresh it just to see. Yeah, as you can see, it's approved. But its recording is still not enabled because recording workflow hasn't triggered yet. Let's check the mail, what email we received, right? So just refreshing that part as well. Okay, now as you can see, come on, yep. So we're saying recording request is approved. Your recording will be enabled on the start date, which is already passed for this demo. And I'm going to the enablement workflow now. And I'm going to trigger this workflow manually. Okay. All right. So recurring is fine. Get the items. You see, we got the items here. And for each item, we're going to apply something, right? So we have only one item pulled out of this. You're going to see what was the user. This was the Defend 365. That was the requester. And the output of the body we received is all success. You can see here. I have parsed them in a JSON. I've used them in a condition. And you can see condition was met because that was all success. So now I have updated the SharePoint list item with the information we have. And at the end, I have posted a message to the user saying, so let's go back here. So it was approved, but recording was disabled and status still open. So I'm just going to refresh this. And I'm going to see what happened if the status got updated or not. Yep, now it's enabled. Great. Now, do I receive any notification as a requester on? Yeah, you can see over here, the team recording is enabled for your account. It will be disabled the next day of the date which you mentioned in your end date, right? So now if I go ahead and check the Teams admin portal, I should be able to see the policy and see the user should be added here, defend. So the policy is applied and the user technically can record the meeting. Now, we have only 10 minutes left before our Q&A session, question and answer.
Okay, thank you, Samir. So I have some question here. So
Please.
Is it possible that we actually use the Microsoft Graph to do something like this instead of the Azure function? Why you use the Azure function to enable this and the Azure function API?
So Graph API doesn't have any command, or I would say no call you can make in a Graph API to manage or grant the meeting policy. Graph API is, you can post a message, you can create the message. If you need to post a message in a Teams, you can use a Graph API. If you want to create a Teams, you can do a Graph API and stuff. But to have specifically this task, which admin supposed to do, that assigning or granting this Teams meeting policy, it's not doable through that. Generally, admin use a PowerShell, and that's where we are using Azure Function, where we load our PowerShell and we run it on Azure Function, and we call Azure Function through the API. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that answered the questions.
Yeah. This is the answer. So I'm not seeing any question here in our chat box. Can you please actually show quickly about, on the Azure function and how you configure this for our audience here?
Definitely.
Okay.
Sure, we'll do that. So basically, you go in Azure and go to Function app, and you create a function. I'm not going to create anything right now. I'm just going to show you guys. But
Okay.
basically, you create Azure function and you go into it. But so when I create the Azure function, it's basically creating a blank app, like a function app. I haven't created anything with it until then. What I do is based on my requirement for each of the modules. So I want to enable, I want to disable, I want to do something extra as well, right? For example, then for each of those tasks, so think about your PowerShell based automation you do as an admin, where you have different modules or functions you create under your PowerShell, and you call those function to do certain activity, right? So under this function app, I have created two function. One is for enablement and one is the disablement. And along with that, I have configured few environment variables. One of them is Teams meeting policy, the name of the Teams meeting policy, because that's a variable I'm not going to keep changing. And if I need to change that, I don't need to go to the script and change in the script. So that's why I stored it in an environmental variable here. Along with that, as I'm not using OAuth or any other authentication at this moment, I've used tenant ID and the user ID to store those values here and leverage those value into the function app automation. Okay, so that's one of the key piece here for the configuration. Another key piece is how we gonna load, because on your, if you run a PowerShell on your Windows computer, you can load your module, PowerShell module, like a graph or Teams or Exchange or whatever module you want to load, right? But when it comes to function app, Azure function app, you need to load it in a specific manner. You need to come to uh, advanced tools here, and in under that configuration, you need to use this, and you need to requirement PSD. That's a I would say module where you need to define like Microsoft Teams PowerShell module, which version you want to do. So I said 5 point anything is fine with me. So if Microsoft updates something else, basically whenever this Azure function runs, it's going to load that new module into this Azure function and then run it on top of it. So I have commented graph because I was doing some testing, but we can load action online as well and stuff. And I'll literally show you where exactly it looks. Okay. So when you go to advanced tool, the advanced tool will looks like this. And when you click on a go, this is very tiny, which is very difficult to look at, but we click on go, and it will open something like this, Kudu Plus environment. Okay. And when you go to Kudu Plus, if you go to debug console and PowerShell, this is the place where all the data are the things which you have managed dependency. That's where your modules are loaded. So if you see 14th of June, this is the place where my Microsoft Teams PowerShell module is loaded. The current module version I have is 5.9.0. So we don't need to do anything else. We just need to go here and make sure that requirement.psd1 having that module and version, you type it here. Okay. Now I'm jumping on to this two function I created so that I can show you guys how the code will look like. It's exactly what you do in your PowerShell onto Visual Studio Code or into your PowerShell ISE or PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, right? So what we do here is, it's pretty simple. The same policy, we are pulling all the variable from environmental variables, which we defined earlier, right? And then after, we are converting and creating a secure credential. For now, I'm going to use it eventually. I'm going to use certificate based or OAuth. But over here, I'm connecting to Teams PowerShell. and checking the connection status is successful or not. And if then I'm gonna checking the user exists or not. And if user exists, then I'm saying, okay, check the policy is already assigned or not. If not, then assign the policy. And at the end, return all. This is only the extra step we do, because whatever the outcome of the script here, like try and catch, I want to pull all those outcome or the variable values. I'm going to post back to the Power Automate, right? So connection status, what was the value of that? Get status of the user, grant status. When I grant the policy to that user, status of that. And when I'm disconnecting the PowerShell with Teams PowerShell module, what is the status of that? So I'm returning all this value back to the Power Automate. And yeah, that's how I got all those value back. But the logic is here. That's only command. You can run it directly through your Windows PowerShell as well. But this is just an automation I built to do it through Power Automate and Azure Function. Yep.
Okay, thank you so much. So it was really awesome. So I like the actually the scenario. So I think it's a scenario that's the companies actually working with, in the daily basis, in the daily work, to submit a request, and approve it, and also configure something in the Microsoft 365 tenant, or enable, disable something in the, for example, Teams admin center, something like that. So thank you so much. It's a combination of the several technology and products here in the Microsoft 365 environment, such as the Power Automate, the SharePoint, the Teams, Azure Function, and the PowerShell command. Yeah, it was great, and thank you so much. I like this scenario, and hopefully our attendees also like this. So if you have any question, please put it in the chat. If not, so we are going to actually wrap up the session for today. Okay, so I'm getting a comment here so that I can watch it, follow step by step. It is very interesting. Okay, so Fernando, so type this in the comments. So thanks, Arash, for recording this meeting so that I can watch it and follow step by step. It's very interesting to see how an expert like Samir can make automation that can improve the management of an organization. I'm on my way to learn Power Platform, but I'm also learning English, so I must watch the video very slowly. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fernando, and thanks, Samir, for this great session and presentation. Hopefully to see you again or in the future in our following months with another great topic and another great session.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so
Arshad.
much.
Thanks,
Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.